Father called me.
Well, at least there's a lot of offerings of cooperation
Yeah.
across institutions here, but let's move on to Ken Gotsch is going to start with the Administrative Affairs Report. We're going to talk a little bit about a new budget calendar and the budget task force. Both of these came out of, as I mentioned in the update, our AQIP retreat that we, sort of a required retreat we do that goes through the AQIP processes that gets us ready for accreditation, and we took a look at this. I'm going to let Ken report on it. I'll mention one thing, though. We are going to hold one of these reports. That's 5.2, just because we have so many things to report on tonight. And, but go ahead, Ken.
Probably 2 days.
Yep.
Yeah, in terms of 5.1 and the budget calendar and task force work, coming in as the Vice President of Administrative Services, it's really heartening to know that my colleagues are interested in rolling up their sleeves and participating in a more intensive budget exercise for next year. You can tell by the chart before you where we kind of outlined the current process for this year. You can see how much time in September, October, November really doesn't get utilized in our traditional
We
calendar.
love this thing here.
Let everybody get on the
Yeah,
same
let
page.
everybody get there.
So, worked out this
It's up
document.
there, too.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and
Derek, can you dim the lights a little bit?
And this really does
There.
reflect a traditional
Crystal.
approach, the current calendar, so there's nothing wrong about what we've been doing historically, but just over the past couple of years, when we hit fiscal crisis, or we hit situations where we're being disrupted, it's really more planning and more collaboration earlier on in the process is really what's critical. We don't know what the governor's budget is going to have to be this year. We're obviously grateful that some amount came forward, but still there's about 70% of the resources that didn't come to us. And what do we plan for next year? So as we set that stage for next year, the key for us would be as a task force of our peers and our colleagues within the college working together to tackle the various cost issues and strategy issues that really need to be wrestled with earlier in the process. And this is where we also suggest inviting the board into the process earlier instead of waiting to January, maybe more of a board retreat in the November timeframe, so that there's plenty of time to kick over guiding principles and expectations that the board has on the early enough on so that we have time to work with all those mandates and those directions and get them properly baked into our budget process for the coming year. So this document is kind of our internal document that reflects our current budget calendar and kind of what we're proposing for next year. But as you can see, September having a financial task force kickoff internally, conducting education sessions in October, and then convening the board as early as November to go over assumptions and important concepts for the work. And then that'll take us to our normal January timeframe, where hopefully much of that work is done by the traditional January meeting, so that the January meeting can then be really more of the fine-tuning of the strategy and making sure that we're catching the sense of the board, this direction for us.
So let me say one thing, Ken. So really, the biggest change for the board, one of the biggest changes for the board is we used to have that early planning retreat that would be around August, September, early September. We're going to move that back to November and have more robust discussions within the college to make sure the budget's aligned to the strategic goals, the objectives, and talk through more. So when we come to you, we think we'll have a better planning piece in November. And then, as Ken says, we come in that January, very early February timeframe to do the finance retreat. Okay? But I would be,
Have you given any thought to maybe keeping both of those? The reason I say that, we're in kind of unusual times right now with what's going on, and maybe that earlier on date might be more beneficial depending on what the budget situation looks like as well. But still, take a look at in November to do it as well. I mean, it's your call. But,
Yeah, no, totally agree. In fact, if you think about the governor's budget, all the information traditionally gets revealed to us in January.
yeah.
So all of our planning assumptions many times kind of gets rocked at that point. So that check-in in January is still, I would argue, is
I mean,
critical.
she's saying, so you'd have a check-in in September
Right.
or so, August,
Right,
September. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Because who knows if we're even going to get this year's money, let alone
Yeah.
start thinking about next year's as well.
Yeah, and depending on how much content that is, we could do it pre one of the existing meetings or do it as a separate meeting, but we can work through that when the time comes.
So as an example of content too, if we go to the next document, the document that talks about the task force composition, and this is an early version. We've been getting feedback from the senior leaders regarding types of topics to be working on. composition of our committee members. So just for example, as you look at the topics, we're looking at things like overviewing of the academic calendar, what can we do in terms of scheduling, class size, looking at administrative and instructional support efficiency opportunities. We know that new welcoming center is going to be a big opportunity to through reorganization to provide more efficient services to our students. I know earlier today I was mentioning some of you regarding encroachment. A lot of times external funds kind of encroach into the operating funds. What are some of the things that are maybe disrupting our general fund dollars that we maybe rethink? I think one example for us right now is the construction program. It's a very large program that's kind of eating into some of our operating costs. Maybe we need to take some of those construction dollars to cover the operating fund's contribution to it. Looking at some of the non-personnel budget line items, things like travel policies and how we do our printing. So this committee is going to be tasked with really looking from a top-down into our overall budget exercise and making sure that earlier on we're kind of getting our arms around some of our key cost categories and making sure that we're aligning our spend to our strategic plan. And we know this work will lend itself well to our Higher Learning Commission accreditation review. So we know this will also lend itself well to our upcoming accreditation.
So let me make a comment on it. So we're calling this a task force because that's what it is. It'll start actually, we're going to start it up pretty soon, like next month, with some initial discussions, and it'll work its way into the year. But it's a task force, and it's really to address our current financial situation, but it's also to look through the whole college for efficiencies. People can bring ideas in, they can bring that to the group. We're going to look, and so that task, it might go 6 months, it might go 3 years. It's going to be whatever we need to kind of look through all the different costs and get college-wide participation. So we'll have the faculty on there, we'll have union and non-union folks on there, the whole college in terms of attendance.
So who gets picked for the task force?
Yeah, that's-
Volunteers, or how's this going to work?
We'll look for people with expertise from the various groups. So we'll tap into them, we'll have discussions, we're asking them to, and they're bringing forward volunteers, and we'll talk that through and put them on there.
Have you thought of adding any private sector folks
It's
to
a good
the group?
suggestion. We hadn't, but it's a good suggestion.
This might be a good time to at least explore something like that.
We might have somebody too on our foundation board with some finance background to get in college. Look at that.
Did you say this was a project or is this ongoing? I mean, it seems like this should be really a standard, really, for the college.
Well, we may want each year to crank up a finance task force, but for now, we're going to launch this now and get going. And this task force, we're going to see what we can do with it. And it is a task force, and that means it'll have an ending, at some point. But we may want to do some form of it in the future. that's
Successful
stable.
elements to continue on.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Jim.
That's it.
Next item, Ken, is the third quarter financial accountability report.
Is
Chris.
this the one that we're holding in advance of the next meeting, or?
We're
No, this
holding
is the one that-
Item 5.2 in advance.
You're going to do the third quarter financial accountability
Oh,
report, which
thank
they
you.
have
I
at their
got you.
place. Got it.
Okay, fine.
And why don't you leave those lights on and these off? That'll work, Chris, okay?
Dorothy's gonna do the master plan update, right, Dorothy?
Yes.
I began to, as I worked on this, I'm kind of working from the starting point of what we've done in the past.
So show them the document, why don't we?
Yeah, so this is the document right here. It's a PowerPoint in color.
Yeah, and it'll be up there.
Yeah.
So you can follow either way.
And so,
I forgot to tell you.
my understanding of this report is that the brevity,
Sorry about that.
because we could literally go an hour on this topic, but at the same time, as I read board policy regarding, I think it was board policy 118 that defines this responsibility, I noticed that the report didn't really meet the full spirit of what the board policy required. It required us to review all funds in this report, and it also required a kind of an investment report. So as we were drafting this, Andy and myself, I wanted to make sure I started to migrate towards what the board's policy's expectation of this report is. And so there'll be a few new twists to this time around, but for the most part, I'll be evolving it to fully meet the board's expectation. So the first slide, we talk about the operating budget variance. And on this slide, I think David and Andy would traditionally report the note that the overall revenues for the district at this point in time is 65.1 million is what's being expected. So that'd be slide 2, which is not up on the screen. Oh, my control. Thank you, sorry about that.
Or Rich, if you want to.
Thanks. And so that compared to the, what's actually there, there's a difference of about $6 million. And we know that $6 million is the state funding that we didn't receive, the basic ICCB Credit Community College, the credit hour grant. On the expending side, we're pretty much in line with what we've expected overall. And then in terms of this, look in terms of specific funding sources for the year on slide 3, you can see that the ICCB credit hour grant is a $6.1 million differential, essentially, that we noted above. And then in terms of the
Can you go back to that
Let's
one?
go back here. Let's look at this.
So we haven't received that state VOCAD funding either, right? So that's the .3.
Tuition and fees down slightly because of enrollments being down slightly versus what we
It's
anticipated.
a $500,000. And then you got the credit hours there, okay?
So I guess I'm surprised because I thought we had reduced our expenses.
Well, this is the revenues.
I mean, in the first slide, you show that the operating
Mhm.
budget variance, you don't show any reduction in expenses from what was projected.
Yeah, and we'll see that in the next slide as well, too, when we look at these expenses in more detail.
That there is no reduction, or there is?
Yeah, I mean,
We'll go to the
wait,
next sheet.
that's the problem.
There's the expenditure slide.
This is the slide they're asking.
Right, right.
So we're about 100,000
This is the-
difference.
Yeah, I know expected is the word that's being used versus actual. So I don't know if if expected is adjusted to meet your expectation, or expected is,
All right, we've been told that we're gonna be, given a balanced budget. And I'm understanding that we're gonna be balanced by the end of this fiscal
Yeah,
year.
he's gonna,
And so we're now like 6 or 7 million off in terms of revenue. But,
so you want to jump to the punchline, or?
well, I wanna know why our expenses aren't lower. I guess I would have thought that they would have been, because everything that we've been hearing about, we have been working on reducing our expenses. But according to this, I'm back in your first chart where, we're still down by 3.5 million on this first chart.
Coming to a page that's going to show that.
yeah,
All right, we're gonna get there?
yep.
So the slide that shows that is coming up. So that's the expenditures. And the next slide is a good news slide. This is where you start to get back in balance. Governor signs a bill that provides 27% of our basic operating grant. So of that deficit that we're looking at, 2.18 million of it's coming from that grant. In addition, we're estimating about 350,000 coming from the MAP grant. However, there was a negative that hit us in the past couple of weeks. The state was making an error in its calculation of the replacement tax. So that's going to cost us potentially almost $150,000. And we didn't get funding for adult ed, which we included in this year's budget, and we didn't get funding for the technical education portion of the budget either. And finally, the state still hasn't funded that $14 million construction grant. So the net effect of all this is,
Can we just go back to this? I see this here.
Yep.
So the science construction funding,
Mhm.
where is that?
it's my understanding, bonds were issued, the state has the funds in an account.
They're in
And
account.
it's just waiting for the legislature to appropriate those funds and the governor to sign the bill.
Okay, so are we reaching out to a legislator to sponsor this bill?
It's my understanding.
Yeah, I have, yeah, no, I've talked to him.
Where's
I talked to Senator.
Nick?
According to Comptroller Munger, that you asked me to follow up on that.
Yeah.
They need a voucher in order to release those funds. And at this point, they do not have the authority due to the legislature.
And so the governor, I talked to a Republican lobbyist recently. Her line is what the governor's line, and it's what our Republican legislators say, is they don't want to release capital funds unless there's a budget. So just like our funding is being held hostage, so is the capital funds. And I did talk to Senator Link about running a bill. He said he's willing to do that, but it would have to be veto-proof out of the House, probably. But I think this is an area we could lobby on a little bit, and I think we could get some people sympathetic to it.
It seems to me that's a different, it's a different issue. It's not that the governor wants the revenue to be tied to the bill. There's not a revenue tied to it, and then he will veto it. The revenue's already here.
Now, it's not just the revenue issue. They're not saying it's a revenue issue. They're saying they want a budget. They want an approved budget. the money is there, maybe all the money's there. We don't know if the money's there for all the projects, but there is money